Celtics Reddit podcast.
Back out to Smart. Fakes the pass all the time. Three. Bang! Gets Williams screen. Lobs it up for Robert Williams.
Shouldn't he know? Jaylen Brown. What a thunder!
Tatum. Durant, the long reach. Tatum crossover pull-up jumper. It's good. 50 points for Jason Tatum.
Hello and welcome to the Celtics Reddit podcast. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. The Celtics, they just won Summer League Game 2 in incredible fashion thanks to Matty Ryan, joining us to talk all about it. A new voice, a new face, joining us for the first time. Squim Jim, welcome sir. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ben. It's that was a heck of a finish.
It was an insane game. And thank you, by the way, for joining us on playback, our live stream of the game there, and warming up the vocal cords before we got started. But just a wild game on all fronts. Like, it was summer league for literally everyone involved, the broadcast team, players, etc. And then that Matty Ryan literal ankle breaker, unfortunately his own ankle finish to win the game. Did you expect, that much of an exhilarating performance out of a summer league game?
No, man, that was a fun one, and it's crazy. Sometimes summer league, you're just focused on the players, and you're not really interested in necessarily always the outcome of the game. But that one, I was, I just got heavily invested, and then at the end. It was an entire roller coaster that fourth quarter with Bagaran taking over, and then just the dunks and the threes and the different calls that were made, and it was good. It was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to apologize to you, Squib Jim. To anyone listening before we were recording, I was like, we won't talk about the game. We'll just talk about the performances. And then my first question was how about the game? So there you go. But yeah, you're right. Bagaran in the fourth quarter taking over with his amazing hair and pressing ability defensively, and just pushing the ball on offense as well was really good to see. So all right, so two things tonight. First off, pretty simple. We're ranking the top 5 Celtics Summer League performances so far. Or performers, rather, not performances, so far, and assigning them a roster making likeliness score out of 10, as in how likely they are to make the 15-man roster. Then we're going to circle back on a recent Reddit post about what aspect of each Celtic rotation player's game do we want them to work on this offseason. So, Squim Jim, we'll start with you. What's your number 1 ranked Celtics Summer League performer so far this Summer League season?
I feel like it's got to be Matt Ryan, right? He just feels like he's making everything. There's nothing that's missing, and I'm just you really hope that everything's good, but then capping it off, with that last shot, I think for me he's probably at the top right now.
Yeah, we definitely spoiled as Celtics fans. We just made the finals, and then we get this incredible bank shot game winner from one of last year's deep bench guys in Matt Ryan. Yeah, I mean, certainly I had him in my top 3, but to be fair, I made this ranking about halfway through that game and didn't incorporate the incredible winning there. But 7 for 12 in this game, good for 58% from the floor. Hit all his free throws, and just generally looked like one of the more competent players out there. Can we talk about his roster likeliness score? And that's a working title, by the way. Apologies for that. Where, in your heart of hearts, Squim Jim, where do you see him there out of 10 likeliness to make the 15-man roster there?
I don't think, because we have 3 more roster spots. Is that correct?
Give or take 1 or
that
2
we need to fill. And right, I would probably maybe
yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, he was on the team last year. He was present in a lot of the. Not that this speaks to how effective he could be on the team, but in any of the highlights of the Celtics have won the Eastern Conference Finals, there's Matty Ryan in the background celebrating, so maybe there's a chemistry component there. But certainly as far as performances, he's been up there for the Celtics so far. I'll swoop in with my number 2. I want to say Juwan Bagaran. I know I've completely butchered the Bagaran is what I should be shooting for. Just particularly like you mentioned up the top there, Squim Jim, like the fourth quarter of this game where he, I don't want to say took over, but he absolutely asserted himself. And on both ends, he was forcing turnovers, a number of possessions where, one of the Bucks players dribbled it off their knee or their foot or whatever, but it was clearly, Bagaran sort of steering them in that direction and forcing that turnover. And then offensively, just getting to the hoop, pushing the ball, setting other guys up. He had that ridiculous poster dunk, like that huge posterization, which was insane. I don't want to say dunk of the Summer League because I haven't watched that many Summer League games, but like that was incredible. So is it fair to say we can slot him in there at number 2?
I think he would be my number 2 as well. Because going back to the first game too, I think he did pretty well. And then that fourth quarter, I just felt like I wanted him to have the ball every time down the court, either him or Ryan.
They seem like the more reliable options. And he's 19 years old. He is currently playing for Paris Basketball, I believe is the name of the team, the basketball team that plays in Paris. What do you see as more likely for him? Like, is he likely to make the 15-man roster? Is he likely to end up playing for Maine? And would that be better than him going back to Paris, which would be the other potential, outcome?
Yeah, we talked about this on Get Playback, and I don't know. Like, I don't actually have an answer to this one. I don't know if it would be better in Paris, or if he could make the team. I do think he might have a little bit higher chance than Matt Ryan of making the team. I think his defense is good. I think he can defend multiple positions, and so I maybe making the roster. I could see maybe closer to a 7 than the 6. But as far as whether it'd be better for him to go back to Paris or do some stuff in Maine, I'm not sure. I think sometimes the players themselves, like, they might want to go back overseas as opposed to playing the G League, kind of like Madar last year.
And I assume the money is better in France for his role there than it is in the G League, which, like, again, we were talking about this on the playback stream, but like some of those guys, earn nothing and have to hold down day jobs and like get Greyhound buses across the country just to play games and stuff like that. So maybe Paris is the preferred outcome for Bagaran, but he's certainly showing us enough that, like, as fans, like, we at least want to see more of him this season, right? And so, like, the tendency there is to want to see him at least in Maine, whether or not that's best for him personally. It's, who's to say, other than the man himself. Right. But all right, so we're slotting him in at number 2 there in our rankings and giving him a roster likeliness score of 7. It sounds like. So, Squim, I'll throw it to you to throw out a universal number 3rd ranked Summer League player. Who you got?
I think number 3, I give it to Kabengele. I think that this one was a little bit harder, but I think he's done pretty well at defending, and I think the moments I've seen him, like, being able to just go straight up and vertical without fouling, in addition to being that lob threat, being that interior, like, I can get an easy bucket for us if you get me open, kind of. I think game 1 and game 2, I think he was, other than probably Matt Ryan, I think he was probably the most, like, consistent.
Yeah, and sorry to keep throwing back to the playback stream there. If anyone is wondering what we're talking about, there's Playback's a platform where we can all jump in a room and there's one universal screen that we all look at through our web browser. We could all watch the game together. And particularly for the first half of the game, we were so high on Fiondo Kabengele, a name that I'll continue to practice pronouncing. But, we're looking for that additional big man, right, on this roster. So I think that really bumps up his roster likeliness score by default. And he does seem to have I don't want to call him a five-tool player, particularly because that's more of a baseball term, but he does have a lot of the tools of a modern big man, the ability to shoot from the outside, quite mobile defensively, seemed to do quite well putting himself in that, like JD Davison, who we'll get to, was doing a really good spot of penetrating and handing off to someone in the dunker spot. Cabangeli was doing a really good job of being the recipient on that kind of play, and just seemed to have a pretty serviceable basketball IQ, and has had cups of coffee with, I want to say, the Clippers and maybe the Cavs as well. I think he went 27th overall in the 2019 draft too. So, he's he knows what he's doing. He has some sort of NBA acumen, and so he's been an entertaining player to watch so far in the summer league. And I won't say very likely to make the roster because there's a lot of talk of Chinanu Anuaku as well, the notable underhand free throw shooter as well, who just won MVP in the Israeli league. Apparently he's working out with the Celtics to maybe get that extra big man depth spot. But Cabangeli, a lot of fun so far in summer league. Okay, so we've got our 1, 2, and 3 so far. Number 4, JD Davison, I think, finally, the 53rd pick. We've got to throw him out there. And we talked about his ability to penetrate and to find looks, particularly around the bucket for other guys on the team. We seem to be spamming, and Spoonie was calling this out as we were watching the game, running pick and rolls with Davison as the ball handler and seeing what he was capable of creating out of that. And for the most part, I thought he showed some really good flashes in terms of that ability, which, as your third, fourth string point guard, like you just want one sort of notable skill, right? That you can bring them in for spot minutes in the regular season and have them run to some degree of success. And I think he maybe showed us, obviously it's summer league, that he at least has the capability to lean on that a little bit in spot minutes for the Celtics. What have you thought about Davison so far for the summer league?
Yeah, I think he was, I could have put him at 3 or 4. But I think I was really impressed with the first game, just his ability to to kind of stay in control with his athleticism. He was a little bit out of control this past game, this last one against the Bucks. There was just a few times where it almost felt like, kind of like what Jaylen Brown does sometimes, where he just like goes and then is like, oh wait, now what do I do?
Yeah.
And I, led to a couple of turnovers, but I think I would put him around there, and he is really good, or he, at least in these games, he's been pretty good at like finding those, penetrate and then find the person that can, whether it be Cabangeli or a kick out or whatever. I think he's done pretty well with that.
Yeah, I like his tendency to find other players and not to try and take over, from an individual perspective. You can imagine being like, he's not a first round pick, but like the way that fans, I think, perceive him is a little bit of a darling on the team, and that like he's our only pick, and therefore there's probably a bit more focus on him than there would be typically of other second round picks in draft, of the past. And therefore, maybe a considerable amount of additional pressure on him, at least from the fan base perspective. I like that he hasn't tried to sort of take over, and he's more playing within the boundaries of the game and taking what's available to him and setting other guys up. So
the other thing that I've liked with him is that he does push the ball. Like he's not gonna walk it up. He's gonna get it and then go. And I think that's something that our team as a whole would do better to do.
Yeah, I almost also forgot to assign him his roster likeliness score out of 10. What are you thinking there, Squim Jim?
I think he's probably, he's getting a two-way spot, right?
Correct.
At the very least.
Yes.
I think the challenge then is that there's just 5 other guards, on the roster. I have a feeling he might just stay the two-way spot, but giving it a number, I'm not sure. Maybe with Matt Ryan, I would probably still think he's probably even higher than Matt Ryan, but I think he's just going to end up with the two-way spot. So
Yeah, so it's like a 2 or a 3, right? Like pretty
yeah,
unlikely.
it's probably actually low, just because it'd be hard to find the roster spot for him when there are other things that we need, like a wing or a big.
With the two-way though, like you'd like to think we'll see him on at least on the bench for the Celtics. You don't wish for injuries with our sort of starting or rotation caliber players, but they do happen throughout the course of the regular season. So you like to think there's like a taco for victory cigar style, like pocket of 2 or 3 minutes, a few games throughout the regular season where Davidson gets a bit of a run and gets some NBA playing time. What do we got? One more, right? Number 5, Squim Jim. Who's your 5th? I don't know. We're kind of running through this together, so it's a joint 5th ranked player. But who do you think slots in at number 5 there?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of who.
I got a couple of names I can throw at you. I've got 4 names.
Yeah,
here.
go ahead.
Throw
me some names.
Well, most of them are in my honorable mentions tier.
Okay.
So I guess the 5th name I'll throw out to you. And maybe if you're listening, it seems weird that we haven't mentioned this guy yet, but Sam Hauser. Slightly better in game 2.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's roster likeliness score of 10, having literally made the roster already. But...
Right. My challenge with Hauser is that the first game, he kind of wasn't there a whole. It kind of seemed a little non-existent.
Totally.
And then this game, he played, I don't even know if he didn't play much in the second half, or at least in the fourth quarter. I think he only got like 17 minutes or something. I think his roster likelihood is a 10, so he's going to be on the team.
Yeah, it's so interesting though, like watching a guy like Hauser try and be the guy, and it's like just no, like you do not have that at any level. Like you do not have that in your repertoire. Like you are like the little fish that hooks on to the whale shark. That like. It requires, obviously in this analogy, Tatum is the whale shark. You need that to sustain yourself in this environment, and to watch him without that, it can be tough at times.
Yeah, I will say one thing that I liked with Hauser is that I think he did well, at least this past game, with switching. There were a couple of moments where it almost looked like the defense broke down, but he knew where he was supposed to be, and I think that is probably the most important piece for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so he, it might not look great, but I think that there were moments that were promising from him in the fact that he could play in a switching defense and know where to be. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing for him, that and just making open shots, which he's kind of did more this past game.
Yeah, see, I think like what you just called out, the switching defensively, like we're talking about the 5th best player on this Summer League roster. It like has no first round picks on it, I believe. The ability to switch well defensively, I think, is the sort of thing that we're looking for to like qualify you to make that number 5, that 5th ranked spot. So to me, Hauser's a safe bet. I don't know. Do you want to lock that in, and we'll move on to some honorable mentions? Yeah,
we could say Hauser. I think maybe Thomas too was another one who did an admirable job. We could put Hauser at 5.
Yeah, I mean Thomas, that's a good call out because he did sign that 1-year deal with the Celtics last year. It wasn't a 2-way; it was a legitimate NBA contract, albeit 1 year and for I believe the minimum or less. Do you want to throw out a roster likeliness score for him? Like we are looking for wing depth, but he may be a little small and a little light to fill a position of need there for the Celtics.
Yeah, for Broderick Thomas, I don't know. I think he might even be lower than Matt Ryan.
Yeah,
and so 3, 4, something like that.
Yeah, and I think he's a guy who's looking for like a roster spot on an NBA team at this point in his career and trying to avoid the G League to the best of his abilities. So, it might be a mutual parting of ways there between Broderick Thomas and the Celtics. But at the same time, like he's just looking for whatever paycheck he could get, right? Like he's just looking to be showcased and seen by as many teams and front offices as possible. So I don't know if
Yeah.
he's going to end up on the Celtics this year, but we'll see. He was all right in this game, but not particularly good in game one. Okay, honorable mentions. I'm going to throw two names out here and let me know, I guess, what was the more standout player, particularly in the second game, because one of these players only featured in the second game. Trevion Williams and Justin Jackson, who must have signed on for the team like 15 minutes before tip. Who's the more standout player for you there?
Well, of the two, probably Trevion Williams. I mean, just Justin Jackson. He just, like you said, we didn't even know he was going to be on the roster, and then he was, and he made a couple shots. I think he did fairly well. I think every time you watch Trevion Williams, you just, everyone talks about his passing, and that's his bread and butter. And but the main concern is his defense. Can he not be a traffic cone? And I'm not sure if I saw that. I'm not sure if I saw his ability to be able to play an NBA level defense. And so,
I think you're being
whereas
kind.
I think what's that?
I think you're being kind. Like, he really showed us that he can't, I think, play NBA caliber defense. He a couple of times he was like positioned perfectly defensively and still gave up the bucket or the and one in a few cases, which is such a shame because he has like this godlike passing ability, but it's just, you need those supplemental skills like defense.
Yeah.
Even to play in the G League, like, he just doesn't have that.
Whereas I think Justin Jackson has that ability, at least more so than Trevion Williams at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking up Justin Jackson on the box score. Like, he wasn't on the box score for like the first portion of this game. 2 for 8. Not a great shooting performance.
Oh, yeah, I didn't realize he shot. I did not know he shot 8 shots.
But 4 rebounds, 2 assists. Like, he seemed, and he hit, I think, one timely 3 towards the end of the game there. Like, he certainly wasn't terrible, but the fact that we're sort of really scraping the bottom of the barrel here, I think it's a good sign that we should move on. So we've got our top 5 there. We've got a couple of honorable mentions. We're going to pivot completely now to finish up this podcast with a post from user 25degreed, who says, or asks rather, what's one area of improvement you want to see from each Celtic rotation player going into next season? And then to quickly throw to another Reddit comment as the top comment on that post by the Doc33, all players should work on less turnovers. That means you do not jump with the ball in your hand unless you are already damn sure of where it's going, which I think universally speaking, but the whole team is very fair. Squim Jim, do you just want to run down the list, like starting with Tatum and then sort of going down an order of operations?
Yeah, Tatum, I think he's shown, at least for me, I think he's shown everything that he needs to show. He's shown the playmaking, like he can do that. In the past, he's shown that he can make his threes. Maybe the finishing, right? There's maybe the finishing is probably the one thing that he needs to add. But I think with Tatum, it's more just that you want him to be his career average self all the time, because if that happens, then last year, if he's just his career average self for the first half of the year, we don't dig a huge hole, right? We don't lose as many games. We're probably a few games over 500 before we start our run instead of a few games under 500.
Mm-hmm.
And then the finals, right? If he's just a career average Tatum, then that series looks completely different. And so I think that being able to be who he's kind of become, but against the best defenses and doing it consistently, because I feel like he's shown everything he needs to show to be the best player on a championship team, right?
Yep.
And he could probably do better at finishing, but I think it's just putting all the pieces he's cultivated and then just doing that consistently.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Just be yourself more often, more consistently, rather than, from the fan perspective, like this roller coaster ride of like, he's the MVP, he's in the top 5, like, yeah, Tatum MVP season, to like, can he lead a team, into a deep playoff run, let alone the finals, and jumping, up and down between those two things throughout the season. I guess, like, looking at that as an actionable task, it's like, okay, don't play in the Olympics this offseason, which is a moot point because there are no Olympics this offseason. Like, get rest, right? So that fatigue is less of a factor to your what will be a 25-year-old body by the time we hit the playoffs next year. So, yeah, to me, work on your game to a point where you can start off the season in rhythm, earlier on, and then protect your body and preserve your body such that you can remain in rhythm the deeper we get into the playoffs and the finals there, hopefully. The one thing I had was finishing at the rim, which you definitely touched on. The other thing would be, we talk about, this is the whole Popovich sort of mentality of like 0.5 second basketball, like catch the ball and you've got half a second to either shoot, drive, or pass. That needs to factor into Tatum complaining to the refs, and I'm not saying anything new here, but you're losing at least 3 multitudes of 0.5 seconds every time you complain to the ref rather than getting back on defense. And that's just such a actionable, fixable part of one's game. Like, you haven't gotten the call. And again, I'm not going to hop on about it because I'm not saying anything new here, but like, just get back on defense, right?
And I think this is something, like, there's some players who I think don't always have the control over that, right? Like I'm thinking of like a Rasheed Wallace or, players like, or like a Draymond Green. But like with Tatum, I feel like he has control over it. I think there's an element to him of like, I think there was an offseason where he focused on trying to get more foul calls, right? And I think complaining to the refs was just part of the strategy of trying to get more calls. Now, this is more of a theory, but part of what goes into that is he got a bunch of technicals throughout the year, and then all of a sudden the playoffs come, and did he even get a technical at all throughout the playoffs?
Not that I can recall.
And that's why I think with him, he's like totally in control over it, right? I think there might be times where it is like a frustration thing, but I think there might also be an element of, I'm trying to sell this, and I know other players who have done this, got the call because they talked to the refs or complained to the refs or whatever,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't think it's worked for him. So, but like I said, I do think there is an element where he has probably a bit more control over it to be able to not, at least from like an emotional standpoint.
And I guess to finish there, like the really positive takeaway is we're almost nitpicking, right? It's like be less tired so you can be more consistent and complain less. But like basketball wise, you're pretty solid. Jaylen Brown, I had ball handling. Is there anything to add to that? I feel like it's a pretty simple, concise sort of offseason focus for him.
I think with him, it's partially ball handling, but I think a lot of it, and it's on both sides of the ball, it's awareness. Like, where are other players? Where when I'm on defense, where's the ball going? Where's my man going? Right? When he's on offense, it's where are my teammates and where are the defenders? Because I think there are a lot of times where, yes, he loses his handle, but there are other times when he puts himself into a situation where he probably, like, if he was more aware of the players and where they were, it could have, like, the situation could have been avoided. And I think to like, I don't remember which team we were playing, but it was in the playoffs, and he's on a fast break, and he just sprints to like the sideline, and then jumps in the air, and then turns around to try to pass it to someone, but nobody's there. He's just around a bunch of the opposing team, and then he throws it to the opposing team because nobody on our team is there. And I think there's an element of handle, and there's an element of like, where are my teammates and where are the defenders?
Yeah.
And and it's on both sides of the ball, because that's part of why sometimes Celtics fans get upset with his off-ball defense.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a similar or higher caliber player who gets like backdoor cut more often than Jaylen Brown. It seems to always be the case where it's just, I don't know if it's part of his personality or, just the way that he thinks about the game while he's in it, but he does seem to have these sort of mental lapses. Also, it was interesting what you mentioned, like his handle on a surface level is like the main point of criticism, but him putting himself in position to have the ball, stripped from him is probably more of a significant takeaway. And I would add to that, particularly against the Heat and the Bucks, where, he would just drive into multiple defenders. And, no matter how good your handle is at that point, if you're driving into like 3 of the league's best defenders, which, particularly the Heat's starting lineup, you could easily say are all there on the court together, you're going to lose the ball. Like no matter how good your handle is, no matter whether you're Jaylen Brown or a Kyrie level ball handler, like if you're putting yourself in those situations, then you're going to lose the ball. So yeah, it's a really interesting takeaway. Marcus Smart, I put catch and shoot threes just in terms of his ability to supplement the Jays and to stretch the floor. Spacing was an issue for us throughout the season and the postseason. Smart being, at least a respectable threat to knock down particularly non-corner three-point jump shots, because he was all right operating out of the corner office there. To me, that's, again, we're nitpicking because Smart was incredible as a defensive player of the year. His ability to finish off ball like that, I think, is huge. What have you got on Marcus Smart?
I don't have much more to add. Just maybe when he's off ball, more off ball movement, floater, I guess, just like other ways to finish. He's a little bit older, so it's harder to know how much he's going to be able to add to his game. But there are things like that, just like you said, the catch and shoot threes and potentially, better finishing, other ways to finish.
What about Rob Williams? A little bit younger, still a lot of upside. What do you think he needs to add to his game this offseason?
I think a lot of Celtics fans want to see him get a jumper,
Yeah.
right? Like be able to just like I'm on the sideline and I can be in the dunker spot, or if that's getting taken away, maybe I can step out, take another step, and be a threat from there as well. Because sometimes some centers are actually able to defend both the drive and rob at the same time, right? But it would be a little bit harder if he could take a couple steps back and hit like a mini mid-range jumper.
So what's the number, like first 10 games of the season, what's the number of like baseline jumper attempts that you're okay with Rob Williams, like, putting up in those first 10 games? Like 3 per game?
Yeah. And that's the other hard thing, is because Rob just typically doesn't get a whole lot of shots anyways, right? And so, yeah, I don't know, 3, 2. And honestly, I do feel that Rob's fine exactly the way that he is, like for what he brings to the team. I think he, obviously you want him to be better. You want every player to be better, but I think in his role, he's just like the best.
Yeah.
Well, not the best, but he does fantastic in his role. And the only other thing is health, right? Just be healthier.
Yeah. We all need that on our off-season checklist. I had, conditioning, really, just like put your body in a position to, outside of any freak accidents or landing on someone's foot or a Matt Ryan ankle breaking, game winning summer league shot, outside of any freak events like that, just put your body in the best position to survive the off season and be there ready for the postseason. Yeah. And it's interesting, like Rob Williams, he's not the best or whatever, like you said, but he certainly is the poster boy for his role. And just listening to off-season podcasts, Bill Simmons, Zach Lowe, etc., they talk about, like, in roster building, you need that defensive roamer who, like, and they refer to it as the Rob Williams role, and he's like absolutely like the reference point for like a defensive anchor at this point, which is a huge testament to the impact that he's had on the game, really, overall, not just the Celtics.
Yeah.
We've got to move on here. Al Horford, I put post-game. I feel like they're in the playoffs, which is more deserving to recent memory. There were a few, like, we got to get a bucket possessions here where, whether it was by design or just how it ended up late in the shot clock, we had Al Horford on the block posting up particularly smaller players. And there's a long list of people in the NBA who are smaller than Al Horford. I feel like we need a little bit more of that from Horford. I feel like he was pretty proficient in that kind of offense. What do you think?
I think at this point, Al is who he is, and we're not going to necessarily get, like, I don't think there's a skill that he's going to necessarily develop.
He's not going to work out with Hakeem Olajuwon in the offseason and develop a post game.
I mean, there probably definitely are more opportunities to find him in the post, right? You know, it's not necessarily a matter of something that he's going to add to his game. What I did like, and even though I say that, one thing that I feel like he added to his game coming back was rebounding. Mm-hmm. And because he wasn't always as good, he wasn't always this good at rebounding. He was always kind of like, you know, a great defensive center who maybe couldn't close out the possession with the rebound. But I feel like when he came back, he's just been so much better. And so maybe he can find a new skills in the post to be able to exploit smaller defenders. It certainly would help.
Yeah, and you made a really good point there. It's like more about us finding him in that, like, he's a fully developed NBA player at this point, and just putting him in that position to exhibit what is probably already a decent skill for him. Derek White, what are you hoping Derek White to come back with after this offseason?
I think it's just the shooting, right? If he's
100%.
If he's making the open shots, then we're great. I think he's one of the better off-ball movers that we have in our main rotation. That's important, but if he can't make the shot after moving around all over the place on offense, then it's all kind of for naught, right?
Yeah, and just his impact on spacing as well. Like, sorry to harp on about it, but you need to be somewhat of a threat to knock down a shot in order to allow Tatum or Brown and whoever else to do what we expect them to do. If I was really, really nitpicking, and this is probably taking it too far, but for him to increase his sort of base of strength through deadlifts or however it's done, but we saw Derek White be picked on defensively because he was like the lowest common denominator, someone to pick on, like the least defensively strong person. And a few times we saw him get bullied and pushed down under the basket and scored on. So a secondary thing to improve on for him would be just to slightly increase the strength there. I don't know how possible that is throughout the course of one off season, but again, we're nitpicking. Malcolm Brogdon, this could be a tough one because, we didn't watch a lot of Pacers games in the last, season or two. I put defense, and not to say that he's a particularly bad defensive player, but if you think about something that he needs to now focus on this offseason, it's like, how can I bring myself up to speed with what these guys are doing defensively? And there may not be a physical component to that. It's just like, I need to, as a mindset, and learning the defensive system, bring myself up to speed with how these guys are operating. Well, what do you think about that?
It could. I think another thing he could focus on was potentially, because this past year his shooting was down a lot.
Right.
Being able to be who he was before this year. I think injuries probably impacted that, but it's probably even more important that he's able to fit into the defensive identity that we have, especially if we're hoping that he can be more of a playmaker, right? Obviously, we want him to provide scoring, but if we're also here for him to be a playmaker to get other people going, then it's, maybe the fitting into that defensive identity is the more important piece.
Yeah, and on one hand, I want to say the shooting, now that he's not the focal point of the opposing team's defense, like, it's not going to be an issue. But we said that about Derek White, and he still couldn't shoot the ball for shit. So, we'll see. Just finally, to wrap up, Grant Williams, maybe the bottom of the list of rotational players here. Some might argue we should have included Peyton Pritchard, but, whatever. Right. Grant Williams, I put dribble drive attacking closeouts and finishing like a counter move essentially to being closed out on in the corner office where he operates.
Yep.
Anything to add to that?
No, I think that's good. I think with him, it's part of the issue with everyone. And that we just need more movement. And Grant's one where when he's in here, he's probably gonna be in the corner, but how do we waiting for that catch and shoot moment? But is there a way for us to use him and everyone, right? Everyone in more movement. And I don't know. I'm not entirely sure how to make that happen, but I think being able to do what he does while also moving.
Yeah. Yeah, as far as how to make that happen, I guess it's above our pay grade. That's up to some much higher paid, Celtics coaching staffers. But get on that, guys. Make that happen. That's what we want to see this offseason. All right, well, there you go. Like, let us know if you're listening or watching the pod. Let us know your thoughts, anything you want to add or subtract from that discussion, particularly around, either Summer League rankings or things, focal points for players individually this offseason. That is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to support the show, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, etc. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is growing every day. Scrim Jim, first pod in the bag. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm feeling pretty good. It was a good experience. Thank you for having me on.
It's great, right? You just hang out, talk about the Celtics, and record it. Nothing easier. Yeah. No, it was great to have you. Thank you so much for coming on, and looking forward to the next one. We will be back shortly after the next game. Just going to keep it rolling here throughout the offseason. Until then, go Celtics. Peace.